the conductor at Montclair State, talked to me about doing a piece for the symphony here. And there was a possibility that it would have been on the same program as Gershwin's An American in Paris. And I began thinking, there are lots of different kinds of Americans in Paris. And going back to that, I began thinking about 1965 and my first trip to Paris. My father was directing one of James Baldwin's plays, Amen Corner. So I began thinking about James Baldwin and what Paris meant to him and what that meant to our trip. And I began thinking about all the other people to whom Paris meant a lot. I was thinking, of course, about Josephine Baker. And I also began thinking about Paul Robeson. And so the characters in A Star Across the Ocean are inspired by these characters, these mythic figures. It begins with an interracial family, the black father, white mother, and their son are in a brand new Boeing 707 winging their way to Paris in 1965. And the excerpts you'll see at VOX begin with a number called Four Engines. The style is very contemporary to 1965. There's the beginning of minimalist ideas. The accompaniment is very much based on the physicality of what a plane sounds like when you're in it. Sometimes jet engines are slightly out of phase, and there are beats within the relationship between engines. And those are the beats. The mother is scared of flying. She sings about the four engines on the plane. There are four engines. 1, 2, 3, 4 engines. Keeping us airborne, that should do it. And as they are in Paris, they find that it is a Paris haunted by still living ghosts. It's a Paris that's haunted by Josephine Baker, haunted by the ghost of Paul Robeson, and the ghosts sing separate, non-narrative sections. So here we have the character of the chanteuse, which is inspired by Josephine Baker, and she's walking up the Champs-Élysées and trying to come to terms with her disappointment in her sense of possibilities at that moment. The accompaniment figure is based on her walking. And she sings, "There's a star across the ocean, a point where all roads meet." And so we have this ambiguity. This is two things at the same time. It's both 6/8 and 3/4, and the tension of which is it at any given moment, and it's both. And it's sort of like a refusal to choose. And if there's anything that marks what I do, it's a refusal to choose and a refusal to accept the restrictions of the boxes and the categories. Because a lot of these categories are socially based and based in racial power, economic power. So what I choose to do is not choose. So there's a section called The Back on the Beach. We move from Paris back to the Jersey Shore. You ain't no river. I had an image of Paul Robeson in 1965 lying on a beach, looking across the Atlantic Ocean at Paris, thinking about his famous statements in Paris in 1949 that were sympathetic to the Soviet Union, and very much because of that he ended up being blacklisted. And he addresses the Atlantic Ocean and says, "You ain't no river." So that is the world through which we see this contemporary family in 1965. And there's a theme through the entire opera of difference and sameness, and the idea that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, or the world is fairer on the other side of the ocean, where in reality it might not be. So finally, Josephine Baker reaches L'Etoile, and it is not what she expected, and she feels the full weight of her disappointment, while the son from the initial family sings of his hope. So both go on at the same time, both exist. It's different but the same.